September 14th, 1944. 2:10 hours. A cold fog drifts across the treeline outside a small French village near the Moselle River. Moonlight cuts through in thin silver strips. The only sound is the wet crackle of boots moving through the brush. A lone American soldier steps out of the darkness. He isn't carrying a Thompson. He isn't carrying an M1 Garand. Slung across his back is something no one on a World War II battlefield expects to see. A longbow. Captain Robert Bob Smalls of the 5th Ranger Battalion watches him approach and feels his stomach tighten. You can almost smell the damp earth, the cordite hanging in the air. The night has the kind of silence that makes you hold your breath without realizing it. The stranger stops in front of the patrol. He slowly lowers his hood, wipes the mud from his cheek, and nods like he just finished something routine. But there's blood on his sleeve. Smalls steps forward. "Name!" The stranger grips the bowstring with callous fingers. "Corporal Alden Hayes, sir." His voice is calm. Too calm for a night like this. Smalls' eyes drift to the weapon. A medieval longbow, nearly 6 feet tall. Laminated wood. Custom fletched arrows. It looks like something pulled straight out of a museum. The Rangers around Smalls exchange quick looks, trying not to smirk. A bow. On the western front. "Where's your squad, Corporal?" Smalls asks. Hayes glances back toward the trees. His jaw tightened for the slightest moment. Ambush. German NCOs. 7 of them. One of the Rangers whistles under his breath. "And how'd you get out of that?" Hayes raises his eyes. Steady. Unblinking. "I didn't get out," he says. "They didn't." The smirks disappear. The fog shifts again, rolling past their boots. You can almost feel that heavy, cold wetness against your ankles. Something about Hayes' expression tells the Rangers he isn't joking. He's pale, breathing slow and deep, the way a hunter looks after a kill. Smalls studies him closely. Hayes' uniform is torn across the shoulder, where a round grazed him. His right hand trembles, but not out of fear, more like adrenaline, refusing to leave his body. "What were you doing out here alone?" Smalls asks. Hayes answers without emotion, finishing what they started. The Rangers don't know what to say. The only thing more absurd than the idea of a longbow on a modern battlefield is the look in this man's eyes. There's a weight behind them, a story they haven't heard yet. Smalls finally gestures toward the farmhouse where their forward observation post is tucked behind an apple orchard. Inside. "Now." Hayes nods and follows. The wooden floor creaks beneath their boots. A lantern burns low on a table covered with maps. Rain taps gently on the window. A kettle rattles from the chill draft coming under the door. Hayes leans the bow against the wall with reverence. His fingers trace the grip like it's something sacred. The Rangers watch from the edges of the room. They whisper, "Who even brings that to war? Where the hell did he learn to shoot something like that? Is this guy touched in the head or what?" Hayes ignores all of it. He reaches into his quiver and pulls out an arrow. The shaft is handcrafted. The broadhead is razor-shine steel. The fletching is dark gray, almost black. You can imagine how silent it must have flown through the trees. Smalls narrows his eyes. "Corporal, explain." Hayes sets the arrow on the table. The faint lantern light glints off the metal tip. 3 days ago. He begins quietly. "Our squad was tracking a group of German field sergeants moving supplies to the woods east of Dornot. They spotted us first." The room goes still. Even the kettle stops rattling. Hayes continues. "They killed everyone around me. 6 of my closest men. I went aground in the brush. They thought I was dead." He pauses. "I wasn't." Smalls crosses his arms. "And the bow." Hayes looks up with a calm that feels out of place. It doesn't jam. It doesn't reveal your position. It doesn't miss. Someone lets out a nervous laugh. Hayes' face doesn't move. The laugh dies. "And you're saying you used that thing to take out 7 German NCOs?" Smalls asks. Hayes nods once. "Not saying, Captain. Reporting." A chill crawls through the room. The Rangers exchange uneasy glances. Hayes isn't boasting. He isn't bragging. He's stating it the way someone states the weather. Outside, a dog barks in the distance. Then another. Smalls moves to the window, peeling back the curtain. The orchard is quiet. Too quiet. A faint snapping of branches echoes from the tree-line. Hayes reaches for his bow. Smalls turns toward him. You expecting someone? Hayes pulls an arrow from the quiver and knocks it in one fluid motion. No, sir, he says softly, but they might be expecting me. The room falls into a tense silence. Then, from the darkness outside, a voice shouts in German, and every ranger freezes. The shout slices through the night. Short, sharp, confident. A command voice. Smalls drops the curtain. Positions, he snaps. Boots scrape against the wooden floor as rangers rush to the windows and doorways, rifles raised. The farmhouse seems to shrink under the pressure of the moment. You can almost feel your pulse match the rapid thud of their movements. Hayes is the only one who doesn't rush. He stands in the middle of the room, bow in hand, head tilted slightly as if he's listening to something no one else can hear. Another German voice calls out, closer this time. The tone is steady, experienced, the way NCOs sound when they know they have the upper hand. Smalls motions Hayes to the back corner. Stay down. You're wounded. Hayes shakes his head. I know that man. It's not bravado. It's not emotion. It's recognition. Smalls freezes. From where? Hayes draws the bowstring back halfway, testing its tension. The string whispers like a violin being tuned. He was one of the sergeants who got away. Hayes says quietly, which means he didn't come alone. Outside, the orchard rustles again. Low, creeping movement. 5 shapes, maybe 6. The fog swallows them, revealing only faint silhouettes gliding between the trees. The rangers steady their rifles. Someone mutters a prayer. Hayes steps forward. Smalls grabs his arm. Corporal, this is a rifle fight. Hayes looks him dead in the eyes. For you, maybe. He slips past Smalls and moves to the side door. His boots barely make a sound on the wood. The room watches him, unsure whether they're seeing courage or madness. The moment Hayes opens the door, the cold air floods in. You can almost taste the moisture, the metallic scent of rain-soaked leaves. Hayes melts into the darkness outside. Smalls clenches his jaw. Cover him. No one fires unless fired upon. The rangers shift, every rifle tracking movement in the orchard. A German flashlight snaps on. A beam cuts through the fog. It lands on boot prints near the tree line. The German sergeant calls out again, this time with certainty. He knows someone is here. Hayes moves between the trees like a shadow that decided to become real. He crouches low, drawing the bow. His breath fogs in the cold air. His heartbeat steadies. He spots the first German, a Feldwebel sweeping the flashlight left and right, MP40 slung low. Hayes watches the rhythm of the light beam. Predictable, mechanical, vulnerable. He exhales. The arrow leaves a bow with a soft thump. Not a crack, not a boom, just a smooth, deadly whisper. The German collapses silently, the flashlight dropping into grass without alerting anyone. Back in the farmhouse, the rangers see the light fall. They glance at one another, confused. No gunshot, no shout, just absence. Hayes moves again. Another German appears near the apple crates, crouched low with binoculars. Hayes draws, releases. The arrow hits him under the collarbone. He goes down quietly, fingers digging into the soil in shock. Inside the farmhouse, Private Langley swallows hard. What in God's name is he doing out there? Smalls doesn't answer. He's watching too closely to speak. Hayes circles behind the third German, who stands near the fence line, inspecting the ground. Hayes lifts a broken apple branch and tosses it to the left. The German spins toward the sound. Hayes releases. The arrow lands between his shoulder blades. The man falls forward, face first into the wet grass. 3 down. The remaining Germans finally sense something wrong. They tighten formation, moving back to back, scanning the fog with tense, jerky movements. Their breath comes fast. They whisper in short bursts of sharp German consonants. Fear is taking over. Smalls grips the windowsill. Where is he now? The answer comes a moment later. A soft whistle. Not from Hayes. from the German sergeant. He's signaling to retreat. Hayes hears it and freezes. His eyes narrow. The sergeant is close now, maybe 15 yards ahead, waiting behind the trunk of an old apple tree. Hayes steps forward, quiet as snowfall. The sergeant steps out at the same time, pistol raised. Both men see each other. Both men draw, one with steel and powder, one with wood and string. The sergeant fires. The bullet cracks through the branches, grazes Hayes' sleeve, and punches splinters from the tree behind him. Hayes' arrow is already gone. It flies straight, fast, a perfect shot. It hits the German under the ribs. The sergeant stumbles backward, dropping his pistol, falling to one knee. His breath leaves in a sharp gasp. But he doesn't die. He reaches for a whistle hanging around his neck. Hayes sees it, and he runs. The sergeant lifts the whistle. Hayes leaps forward. The whistle reaches his lips. Hayes pulls another arrow. The whistle never sounds. The orchard goes still. But inside the farmhouse, the Rangers hear something else. Movement. Heavy movement. Approaching fast through the fog. Not one man. Not two. A whole squad. Hayes doesn't see them yet. But he will. And when he does, everything about the next 48 hours will change the legend forever. The sound reaches Hayes first. Not voices. Not boots. Something heavier. Metal. A bolt clacking forward. A magazine locking into place. Gears shifting against thick wool uniforms. He turns slowly toward the deeper fog. The orchard feels tighter now, like the trees are closing in. The moonlight fades behind a passing cloud, and for a moment the whole world drops into near black silence. Then the shapes emerge. 8 Germans, all armed, all moving in a tight, disciplined line. This isn't a patrol. This is a hunting party. Back in the farmhouse, Small swears under his breath. They brought reinforcements. They knew he'd come back. Private Langley grips his rifle, so hard his knuckles turn white. We have to pull him in. Smalls doesn't answer. He's watching Hayes through the window, but Hayes is too far now. Too deep among the trees. Too committed. And Hayes doesn't retreat. He lowers the center of gravity, draws an arrow, and studies the movement of the German squad. You can almost feel his focus tightening like a lens. He isn't panicked. He isn't rushing. He's reading the hunt as if he's the one leading it. The Germans spread out in a stagger formation, weapons raised. Their leader motions for 2 men to flank left and sweep the orchard circle by circle. Hayes waits for the pattern. The moment when the flanker steps over a fallen branch, Hayes releases. The arrow hits him in the neck, and the man falls without a sound. The second flanker freezes, confused. He turns toward the body. Hayes releases again. 2 down. The remaining Germans spin in every direction, fingers tight on their triggers. One fires blindly into the fog. Another calls out the corporal's last known position. Smalls hears the burst and curses. They're panicking. Good. But Hayes isn't relying on panic. He's relying on rhythm. He moves deeper into the orchard, weaving between the trees, letting the fog fold over him. You can almost feel his boots on the wet earth, the rough bark scraping his sleeve, the cold air cutting into the wound on his shoulder. One of the Germans steps over the sergeant's body. His voice is tight with nerves, the kind that comes from knowing something is hunting you, but not knowing from where. Hayes draws in a slow breath. The arrow lands just under the man's chin. He drops backward, legs folding. His helmet hits the ground with a hollow metallic thud. 3 arrows left. 5 Germans remaining. The leader barks an order. His voice tries to sound firm, but fear pushes through the edges. He sends 1 pair right, 1 pair left, and stays central with his MP40 sweeping the fog. Hayes climbs onto a low branch of an apple tree. His boots grip the wet wood. His bow points downward. He waits for the right moment. Below him, a German steps into view, scanning the tree lean. Hayes lets the arrow fall more than fly. It drops straight into the man's shoulder. He screams, and the silence of the orchard shatters. Gunfire erupts. Bullets rip through branches around Hayes. Wood splinters. Leaves fall like shrapnel. He drops from the branch, rolls through the grass, and darts behind a large apple crate. Inside the farmhouse, Smalls clenches his fists. We have to move. Now, if they surround him. One of the rangers interrupts. Sir, look. Hayes steps out from behind the crate. He's calm again. He moves toward the gunfire, not away from it. The Germans fire another burst, muzzle flashes lighting up the fog like strobe lights. Hayes uses the flashes as markers. He zigzags between the trees, timing his steps to the bursts. One German panics and fires too long, too bright. Hayes releases. The arrow hits him in the abdomen, and he crumples, clutching at the shaft. 2 arrows left, 3 Germans remaining. The leader shouts something furious and desperate. He's not hunting anymore. He's trying to survive something he doesn't understand. Hayes circles behind a tree trunk, breathing hard now. His wound burns. His vision tunnels for a moment. He steadies it with a sharp inhale. Then the orchard goes quiet again. Too quiet. The Germans have stopped firing. They're listening, trying to hear the bow, trying to hear the man who kills without sound. Hayes takes one slow step forward. A branch snaps behind him. He spins. Too late. The last remaining flanker rushes him from behind, slamming him into a tree. Hayes grunts as pain shoots through his shoulder. The German raises a knife and drives it downward. Hayes traps the man's wrist with both hands. The blade stops inches above his throat. The German snarls, pushing harder. Hayes' arms shake. His boots slide in the mud. The knife inch closer. Inside the farmhouse, Small shouts, "He's in a fight. Move." Rangers storm out of the farmhouse, but Hayes knows they won't reach him in time. The German presses the blade again. Hayes lets go of the man's wrist. The German lunges forward, and Hayes uses momentum to trap the man's knife hand under his armpit, twisting him off balance. With his free hand, Hayes pulls an arrow and drives it upward. The German drops instantly. Hayes pulls the arrow out, breathing fast, stumbling back toward the deeper fog. He has one arrow left, and 2 Germans still hunting him. The leader and his last man, both armed, both angry, and both heading straight toward him. What happens next won't just define the legend. It will decide whether Hayes survives the night at all. Hayes wipes the blood from his cheek with the back of his sleeve. His breath hangs in the cold air in short, shaky bursts. He's pushed his body past its limit, but the night isn't done with him yet. Somewhere ahead, boots grind through the wet soil. 2 sets. The orchard is darker now. A cloud smothers the moon, and everything fades into shapes and shadows. You can almost feel the damp cold creeping into Hayes' bones. His wounded shoulder throbs with every step. He pulls the final arrow from his quiver. One left. He runs his thumb along the fletching. It's bent, slightly, not enough to make the shot impossible, but enough to make the margin unforgiving. Hayes grips the bow tighter. He listens. The Germans are speaking in low voices, but the tone has changed. Gone is the aggression. Gone is the confidence. Now there's tension, calculation. The leader knows his men keep dying without a single shot being returned. They don't understand the threat. That fear makes them dangerous. Hayes lowers himself behind a row of apple trees. The branches sag under the weight of moisture. Leaves drip onto his helmet. His boots sink into soft mud. He scans the fog for movement. The Germans are splitting up again. A mistake. One heads left, weaving between trees with his MP40 raised. The other, the squad leader, circles right, aiming to trap Hayes in the center of the orchard. Hayes stays low. The air is thick, heavy, quiet. His heartbeat is the only thing he can hear clearly. He moves toward the leftmost German, slipping behind a fallen tree trunk. His boots make barely a whisper in the grass. The fog hides him, but it also hides him. Each step becomes a gamble. He peeks over the trunk. The German is 10 yards away, close enough to see the fear in his eyes. He's sweating despite the cold, scanning left or right in a frantic rhythm. His finger twitches on the trigger. Hayes lifts the bow. He draws the last arrow. The bowstring digs into his fingertips. He inhales. And then, a distant rifle shot cracks through the orchard. It's not German. It's American. From the farmhouse. Hayes knows immediately what happened. A ranger saw movement and fired. The German hears it too and spins toward the sound. Hayes releases. The arrow hits the man high in the ribs. The German collapses sideways, clutching the shaft, eyes wide with confusion that turns into stillness. Hayes pulls back behind the trunk. He's empty. No arrows left. No blade. Just exhaustion, instinct, and a bow with nothing to fire. He listens again. The leader has gone silent. That's bad. Hayes moves deeper between the trees, slipping to the fog like he belongs in it. His shoulder throbs harder now. He winces and presses a hand against the wound. A twig snaps to his right. Hayes freezes. The German leader steps out from behind a tree, MP40 raised. Finger steady on the trigger. His face is tense and furious, lit faintly by the lantern glow spilling out from the farmhouse window. He doesn't fire right away. He studies Hayes. You, he says in accented English. You killed my men. Hayes straightens slowly, bow still in hand but useless now. The German steps closer, weapon aimed square at Hayes' chest. You think you can fight war with toys? Hayes doesn't blink. I think you underestimated the wrong man. The German's jaw tightens. His finger shifts on the trigger. Hayes takes a small step back. The German mirrors him, closing the distance. You have no arrows left, the leader says. He's right. But Hayes sees something the German doesn't notice. Behind the leader, faint through the fog, the silhouette of a ranger crouches with rifle, moving into position. Slow, deliberate, careful not to reveal himself. Hayes keeps the German's eyes on him. Maybe not, he says, but I still have aim. The German frowns. Aim? With what? Hayes suddenly tosses a bow into the air toward the German's face. Instinct takes over. The German flinches, reflexively jerking the MP40 upward to block the flying bow. The shot never comes. In that split second, a single rifle crack echoes from behind. The German leader jerks backward and collapses into mud, the MP40 clattering beside him. The orchard goes silent again. Hayes stands alone, chest heaving, staring down at the fallen leader. His bow lies in the grass nearby, wet from the fog. Smalls rushes through the trees, rangers behind him. Their boots pound the ground, rifles raised. They surround Hayes like a shield. Smalls grabs him by the arm. You all right? Hayes nods, though his face is pale and his breathing ragged. Smalls looks around at the bodies lying in the orchard. 8 Germans, all dead. A whole hunting squad eliminated by one exhausted American with a bow. Langley breaks the silence first. Sir, he did this with arrows. Smalls exhales slowly. No, he looks Hayes in the eyes. He did this with skill. Hayes tries to speak, but his knees buckle. Smalls catches him under the arms. Easy, Smalls says. You've done enough for one night. Hayes forces a weak smile. Night's not over yet. Smalls frowns. What do you mean? Hayes lifts a trembling hand and points toward the far edge of the orchard, where the fog rolls thicker and heavier. A distant engine rumbles. Then another, and another. The Germans weren't done. And the next wave isn't coming on foot. It's coming on wheels. The rumble grows louder. Not one engine. Not 2. A convoy. The sound crawls through the fog like a warning you can feel in your ribs. Hayes tries to push himself upright, but Smalls forces him back down gently. Stay put. You're bleeding through your shirt. Hayes ignores him. They're sending reinforcements. Real ones this time. The Rangers glance toward the horizon. A faint glow blooms behind the fog, reflecting off the low-hanging branches. Headlights. Multiple. Private Langley swallows hard. Sir, what do we do? Smalls doesn't answer right away. He knows what they're facing. Germans don't send vehicles at night unless they're moving fast and confident. That means trained men, well armed, probably an entire motorized squad. He looks at Hayes. The corporal is swaying slightly, holding himself up with one hand pressed against a tree. His bow hangs loosely in his grip, useless now without arrows. Smalls kneels beside him. You're done. That's an order. Hayes shakes his head. If we stay here, we die. If we run, they track us. That orchard is a funnel. They'll drive straight through the farmhouse. Smalls clenches his jaw. He knows Hayes is right. The rumble grows louder. You can almost feel the vibrations in the soil. The Rangers turn in unison as the first vehicle silhouette pushes through the fog. A cubble wagon. Behind it, a troop carrier. And behind that, another. 3 vehicles. Maybe more. And they're heading straight for the orchard. Smalls rises to his feet. Rangers, on the line. Defensive spread along the crates and trees. Move. Boots pound the dirt. Men sprint into position. Bolts slam forward as rifles chamber rounds. Someone drags a crate into a makeshift barricade. Another tosses extra ammo belts to the machine gunner. The air thickens with adrenaline. Hayes tries to stand, but his legs buckle. Langley grabs him under the shoulder, keeping him upright. Corporal, you can't fight like this. Hayes scans the orchard floor. His eyes narrow. Arrows, not the ones he fired. German arrows, the ones embedded in bodies, in mud, in tree trunks. He pulls his arm free from Langley and stumbles forward. Smalls sees him and storms over. Hayes! I said you're out of this fight. Hayes holds up a finger, panting hard. I'm not leaving you short-handed. He kneels beside one of the fallen Germans and yanks an arrow from the man's chest. The shaft is soaked and warped, but not broken. Smalls stares at him. You're out of your mind. Hayes grips the arrow tighter. You said that earlier, too. Before Smalls can argue, headlights blast through the trees. The cubble wagon bursts into view, bouncing over the roots and mud. The Germans inside raise their weapons. Smalls shouts, "Open fire." The orchard explodes. Rifles crack. Muzzle flashes light up the fog. The machine gun rattles a long burst into the windshield, glass exploding outward. The cubble wagon swerves sideways and slams into an apple tree. German soldiers spill out, returning fire immediately, bullets snapping through branches. Hayes ducks behind a crate, heart pounding. He draws the scavenged arrow and checks his bow, tightening the frayed string with trembling fingers. More Germans jump from the troop carrier. Shouts fill the orchard. Vorwärts! Deckung! Los! Los! Smalls fires from behind a tree. They're trying to flank left. Langley! Thompson! Cut them off. Hayes climbs onto a crate, ignoring the pain stabbing through his shoulder. He spots a German squad leader kneeling behind a fallen log, barking orders. Hayes draws the scavenged arrow, but his arm shakes. His vision blurs. He blinks hard, forcing the world into focus. He exhales. The arrow flies. It wobbles in the air, the warped shaft fighting the wind. For a second, it looks like it might spiral off target. But it hits. The German leader jerks backward, falling into the mud. Hayes grips the crate for balance. Smalls shouts over the gunfire, "Keep firing!" They're regrouping. More Germans pour out of the second vehicle. The orchard becomes a storm of bullets and shouts. Hayes slides down from the crate and reaches for another arrow lodged in the ground. His fingers slip on the wet shaft. A bullet snaps past his ear. Bark flies off the tree behind him. He crouches low and sprints behind the next row of trees, mud splashing under his boots. He's breathing hard now, each inhale sharp and ragged. He spotted a German soldier rushing toward Langley's position. The man's MP-40 is already raised. Langley doesn't see him. Hayes draws the arrow, but his hands tremble too much. He steadies his grip, focuses on the target, feels the weight of the bow. He fires. The arrow hits the German in the thigh, dropping him instantly. Langley turns, startled. Hayes raises a hand weakly in warning. But then, the orchard glows brighter. More headlights, more engines, more voices. For more vehicles are arriving out of the fog. Smalls sees the fresh wave and feels the bottom drop out of his stomach. We're outnumbered, outgunned. Hayes staggers toward him, clutching another arrow. Then we make them think we aren't. Smalls turns to him. How? Hayes nods toward the apple crates, the trees, the fog, everything that hides their numbers. We make enough noise, he says softly, that they think they walked into a whole company. Smalls hesitates for only a second. Then he nods. "Rangers," he shouts. "We're going loud." Gunfire erupts again, but this time with intention. A wall of sound, a roar designed to shake the fog itself. Hayes draws one more arrow, his last scavenged one. His hand tightens around it. But as he turns toward the new wave of Germans, a mortar tube clinks. Someone behind the fog shouts coordinates. Hayes' eyes widen. They're not coming in on foot anymore. The Germans are preparing to level the orchard. Night fell across the continent, and with it came another long stretch of fear and exhaustion for every aircrew still flying the Black Widow. By 1945, the Allies had air superiority, but the threat of lone German intruders, wandering bombers, and desperate hit-and-run missions still forced P-61s into the sky every evening. Some of the most tense moments of the entire war happened in these final months, when the enemy had nothing left to lose. Pilots who flew these late-war missions remembered the same feeling. The sky looked empty, but it never felt safe. Radar picked up strange blips that vanished and reappeared. Ground control sent warnings that didn't always match what the crews saw. Everything seemed unreliable. That uncertainty ate away at the nerves of even the most seasoned veterans. One crew, based near Colmar, recalled a night where the static in their headsets made every call sound like a whisper. The operator kept tapping the side of the radar scope because the contacts were ghosting in and out. Twice they thought they had an enemy lined up. Twice the target melted into the dark. They didn't know if it was weather, a failing component, or an aircraft slipping in and out of the radar beam. But around 2 a.m, everything snapped into focus. A solid return showed up, steady and moving fast. The radio came alive with urgency. Ground control confirmed it. A lone German intruder had slipped through the defensive belt and was heading for supply depots farther west. The order was simple. Find it. Stop it. The pilot pushed the throttles forward. The P-61 climbed and banked hard through clouds. They felt the engine strain as the crew locked onto the target's heading. The operator called out adjustments in a calm voice, even though his hands shook. They closed within firing range. The pilot strained to see anything through the murk. Nothing appeared. No silhouette. No flashes. Just a void. Then, at the last second, the intruder broke through a thin stretch of cloud. The pilot caught a glimpse of a Dornier bomber just ahead. Instinct took over. He armed the guns and lined up the shot. The first burst ripped across the sky. The German aircraft dipped, tried to dive, then pulled upward. Another burst. This time the P-61's fire caught the wing root. A bright flash lit the cloud bank as the bomber broke apart. For a moment, the night went silent. The pilot steadied the aircraft and exhaled. They turned back toward base, their fuel low and nerves fried. By the time they landed, dawn had already begun to break across the airfield. The ground crew waved them in, unaware of how close the enemy had come to slipping through. Stories like this repeated across Europe in those last months. Not dramatic battles with dozens of aircraft, but small, tense hunts that kept the pressure on the enemy and protected Allied soldiers on the ground. The P-61 didn't rack up the flashy kill counts of other fighters, but it shut down a dangerous threat that could have done real damage during a fragile moment of the war. When Germany finally surrendered, many crews who flew the Black Widow didn't even celebrate right away. They were too tired, too worn down from months of chasing blips across the sky. Some left their aircraft with a quiet pat on the fuselage. Grateful the machine had brought them home again and again. Today, the P-61 is remembered by those who study the war, but it rarely gets the attention it deserves. It was built for a mission that played out far from the spotlight. It worked in the dark, in silence, where only a handful of people saw what it could do. Yet every night it flew, it made the skies safer. It let soldiers sleep. It protected the routes that kept armies moving forward. And when the war in Europe ended, it did so with dignity. No grand final mission. No dramatic last stand. Just another quiet patrol over a continent finally ready to rest. When the Black Widow moved to the Pacific, everything changed. Europe had given its crews heavy cloud cover, congested skies, and short-range engagements. The Pacific offered the opposite. Long stretches of open water. Storms that came out of nowhere. Heat that pushed engines to their limits, and enemy pilots who relied on speed, surprise, and unpredictable tactics. Most P-61 crews remember their first night flight over Pacific as overwhelming. The darkness felt bigger, deeper. The ocean below swallowed every hint of light. Even experienced pilots talked about vertigo, where the line between sky and water vanished. The only thing grounding them was the steady hum of the engines and the glow of the instrument panel. Radar operators carried the heaviest mental load. In Europe, they often scanned for small intruders sneaking across borders. In the Pacific, the threats were faster and more dispersed. Japanese night raiders darted in from different directions, hit fast, and vanished before most aircraft could react. If the operator missed even a few seconds of movement, the target disappeared into the void. One mission near Saipan demonstrated how difficult these encounters were. A P-61 crew received a scramble call just before midnight. A Japanese aircraft had been spotted approaching supply ships anchored near the coastline. If it reached them, it could cause serious losses. They took off immediately, climbing into a sky that was covered with thin tropical clouds. The radar picked up a return, but the signal bounced and dipped as weather layers shifted. The crew had to trust their instruments more than their eyes. The pilot followed the operator's instructions, turning and climbing through the uneven cloud cover. Minutes later, they slipped into a clear pocket. The target was ahead, flying low and fast. The Japanese aircraft, likely a bomber, banked left and tried to hug the coastline. The P-61 dove to intercept. The pilot lined up his shot as their altitude dropped. A burst of fire tore across the darkness. Sparks kicked off the enemy's fuselage. It banked again, trying to shake free, but the Black Widow matched the movement. The second burst hit deeper. Flames rolled across the bomber's wing. It tilted downward and disappeared behind a ridge. The crew didn't celebrate. They stayed on station, circling the area until ground personnel confirmed the threat was gone. Patrol after patrol looked like this. Long hours of silence broken by moments of sudden intensity. Crews fought the weather as much as the enemy. They navigated by instruments that often struggled in the heat. Engines overheated. Hydraulics strained. Sweat dripped onto every control surface. But the P-61 proved itself. It intercepted raiders that slipped through other defenses. It protected staging areas critical to the island-hopping campaign. And it gave commanders peace of mind during the nights when they expected desperate Japanese counterattacks. Pilots learned to trust the aircraft. They knew the Black Widow could take punishment and still return home. They knew the radar, despite its quirks, could find what the eye couldn't. And they knew the aircraft had the firepower to end engagements quickly once the enemy was in sight. The Pacific Theater pushed the P-61 to its limit, but also showed what the machine was capable of. Every successful intercept meant safer beaches, safer bases, and fewer night raids reaching American troops already stretched thin. By the time the war neared its end, the Black Widow had become more than a night fighter. It was a guardian for thousands of men stationed across vast, lonely waters. It carried the weight of their safety each night, one mission at a time. As the war crept toward its closing chapters, the missions changed again. The skies grew quieter, but the silence never felt safe. Commanders warned crews that calm nights often had the most unpredictable threats. Desperate pilots flew desperate tactics, and the Pacific had no shortage of them. One night in early August 1945, a P-61 crew launched from a rain-soaked strip in the Philippines. Their orders were simple: patrol the northern approaches and watch for lone raiders trying to slip past radar stations. It sounded routine. It wasn't. The moment they lifted off, the storm swallowed them. Sheets of rain hammered the canopy. The pilot held the controls steady, while lightning flashed somewhere deep in the clouds. The crew climbed until they finally broke through the top layer, rising into clear air lit only by the moon. The radar operator checked the scope. For the first hour, nothing appeared. They flew in slow arcs, letting ground stations track their position. The ocean below stretched out in a smooth black sheet. Some nights it looked peaceful. Other nights, like this one, it felt like an empty world that wanted to pull everything down into it. Then the scope flickered. At first it looked like static. A faint echo. The operator watched it return again, slightly brighter. It was moving. Slow. Low. Alone. He called it out. The pilot tightened his harness and banked the aircraft. The P-61 swung wide and descended until the operator could refine the angle. Every second counted. If the target reached a convoy lined up near the coast, it could cause real damage. They dropped through broken clouds until the ocean came back into view. The operator gave a final heading. The pilot rolled the aircraft forward, leveling out just above the water. There, far ahead, was a small silhouette. The engine glow was barely visible. It looked like a single-engine raider making a slow approach, maybe preparing for a torch run on a ship. The P-61 crept closer. The raider held a steady line, unaware it was being hunted. The crew drew into firing position. The pilot steadied the controls. The gunner waited for the final command. The first burst of fire cut across the night. Tracer stitched through the air and caught the raider on the tail. Its engine sputtered. It dipped. Instead of crashing, it tried to climb. Maybe the pilot hoped to draw them into a stall. Maybe he was buying time. Either way, the Black Widow stayed on him. The second burst struck the right wing. Flames tore upward. The raider banked hard and tried to dive away, but it was too late. The aircraft spun and vanished into the waves. The crew circled until fire on the surface burned out. They marked the coordinates and climbed back into the broken clouds. Another silent flight home. But something felt different on that return trip. The storm had calmed. The air smelled heavy and warm. And for the first time in months, the horizon showed hints of sunrise instead of darkness waiting to fall. A few days later, the news reached the base. The war was effectively over. Crews who spent years chasing shadows through hostile skies walked the flight line in a daze. Some rested their hands on the nose of their aircraft and breathed for what felt like the first time. Others stood quiet, staring at the runway where so many missions had begun with no promise of coming back. For the P-61 crews, the ending felt strange. They had fought in the hours when most soldiers slept, carrying the weight of every quiet patrol and every sudden intercept. Their victories didn't make headlines. Their missions rarely had witnesses, but they kept the night safe and they kept thousands alive. As the sun came up that final morning, a few pilots joked that daylight never looked so bright. They weren't wrong. For the first time, the night didn't call them back, and the Black Widow, scarred, patched, and weather-worn, finally rested. But one mission still lingered in everyone's mind: the lone raider over the Philippines. The last aerial kill confirmed before the guns fell silent. The final shadow hunted down in the dark. No one knew it then, but that engagement would mark the end of the P-61's combat chapter. A closing note written in lightning, rain, and a few seconds of fire over a quiet patch of ocean. And yet, something even bigger waited in the months ahead. A mission that would reshape the aircraft's legacy in ways none of the crews expected. A mission far from any battlefield. A mission that had nothing to do with war and everything to do with history. Peace came fast, almost too fast. One moment the P-61 was hunting raiders in the Pacific, and the next it was sitting quiet on empty runways while crews packed gear into wooden crates. Some men shipped home. Others stayed behind, waiting for reassignment. Bases that once pulsed with tension now echoed with the sound of nothing at all. But the Black Widow wasn't finished. In the fall of 1945, word spread across a few scattered units that something unusual was happening. Engineers and scientists had set up camp in the desert. They were testing equipment that barely existed 2 years earlier. New radars, new tracking gear, instruments that could read air pressure shifts with startling precision, devices so experimental that some barely had instructions. They needed a stable, powerful, controllable aircraft to test it all. One that could carry the new equipment. One that could climb through violent weather without falling apart. One that could stay in the air long enough to map atmospheric layers most pilots never dared to fly into. There weren't many planes that fit the description, but the P-61 did. A few Black Widows were pulled out of storage, inspected from nose to tail, and stripped of their combat fittings. Gun turrets came off. Ammunition chutes were removed. The crews joked that the aircraft looked naked without its weapons, but the airframe remained intimidating. The mission had a name: Project Thunderstorm. Its purpose was simple on paper: fly into the most dangerous storms on Earth and bring back data no one had ever recorded. You can imagine what pilots thought of that. Most aircraft avoided thunderstorms like they were alive. Updrafts could flip a fighter. Crosswinds could tear wings off transports. Lightning could wipe out electrical systems in seconds. Even veteran crews tensed up when they saw a towering cumulonimbus on the horizon. Now they were told to fly directly into one. The first P-61 assigned to the project launched from Florida. The crew had test instruments bolted into the nose compartment, along the fuselage, and in the rear bay. Technicians warned them that readings might spike without warning. Air pressure could change so quickly that dials wouldn't keep up. They might hit turbulence hard enough to throw the aircraft into a side slip, and if the wings iced over, they would have to fight their way out manually. The pilot nodded. The radar operator checked every wire twice. The mechanic slapped the side of the fuselage like it was a living thing. Then the engines roared, and the aircraft rolled down the runway. They approached the first storm an hour later. It rose above the ocean like a black tower, lit from inside by lightning. The pilot tightened his harness. The radar operator braced his feet. At the final moment before entering, the crew could see the storm breathing, inhaling warm coastal wind and exhaling sheets of rain. Then they went in. Everything hit them at once. Turbulence slammed the fuselage. The aircraft dropped several hundred feet in a heartbeat. Lightning flashed so close it washed cockpit in white light. The radar operator yelled out numbers as instruments spiked. The pilot fought the controls to keep the wings level as violent air currents shoved them in every direction. But the Black Widow held together. Every jolt, every gust, every violent shake tested the airframe. The aircraft pressed deeper. Instruments whirred. Pencils rolled across the floor. For long stretches, they flew blind, trusting only the dim glow of gauges. The aircraft climbed, then plunged. Climb. Plunge. Hold steady. Climb again. The crew felt the engine strain but never falter. After what felt like an hour but was barely 10 minutes, the nose finally broke through the top of the storm. They exploded into bright sunlight. The sky calm and quiet above the violent world they had just crossed. They had done it, and they had data. Real data. Wind shear, pressure shifts, electrical activity, temperature gradients. The kind of measurements scientists had begged for since before the war. Word spread fast. More P-61s were pulled into the project. They flew into storm after storm, each mission more daring than the last. Some came back with cracked panels. Others returned with lightning burns streaked across their wings. But the airframe never failed them. Thanks to those flights, meteorologists gained the first deep understanding of how thunderstorms worked. Commercial aviation changed. Safety changed. Forecasting changed. Entire fields of science grew because of data ripped from the heart of storms that no aircraft had ever entered before. And all of it came from a night fighter built for a war that had already ended. But one mission still stood above the rest. A flight so dangerous that even the Project Thunderstorm crews hesitated. A storm so violent that ground controllers almost called it off. A storm that would push the P-61 to the edge of what any aircraft could survive. The storm had been forming for 3 days over the Gulf Coast. Radar operators watched it swell, churning like a living creature, black and roiling with energy. Lightning forked across the cloud with terrifying regularity, striking the ocean and the ground alike. Winds gusted well over 100 miles per hour at higher altitudes. Even the most seasoned pilots and meteorologists agreed. This was the kind of storm you didn't fly into. But that was exactly what Project Thunderstorm had ordered. The P-61 assigned a mission was freshly stripped, instruments bolted into every usable surface. The crew had spent hours checking each line, each gauge, each instrument. There was no margin for error. One miscalculation, one electrical failure, and they would be the storm's next victims. The engines roared as the aircraft lifted off. Rain hammered the canopy, and the runway disappeared under sheets of water. The pilot held a tight grip on the controls. feeling the strain in every joint, every bolt, every muscle. The radar operator beside him squinted at the glowing screen, tracking the storm's outer edges. It looked immense, a black wall stretching miles across the horizon. They were flying into the mouth of a beast. They reached the outer edge of the storm and felt the first real turbulence. The nose dipped, the wings rocked. Lightning illuminated the cockpit in stark white flashes. The P-61 creaked and groaned, but the engines pushed against the gusts. Each second inside the storm felt like minutes stretched into eternity. Inside, instruments went haywire. Pressure readings jumped and dropped unpredictably. Electrical panels flickered with sudden surges. The crew worked furiously, manually adjusting valves, stabilizing the aircraft, and recording the raw data streaming in from sensors designed to survive this hellish environment. A bolt of lightning struck nearby. The fuselage shuddered. Instrumentation blinked dead. The pilot's stomach sank as he realized the static could mask the worst gusts. He fought to maintain altitude, keeping the aircraft level in an invisible battlefield of wind and electricity. Every fiber was being screamed at him to retreat, but he couldn't. The storm's heart held the data they needed. They had to go deeper. Minutes stretched into an hour. The sky inside the storm was a kaleidoscope of black, gray, and white. Hail slammed against the canopy like bullets. Air currents tried to wrench the aircraft from its course. The crew's focus became razor-sharp. Every turn, every adjustment, every meter gained or lost could mean life or death. Then they broke through the core. The heart of the storm unfolded like a maelstrom. Thunder rattled through the fuselage. Lightning exploded in blinding white arcs all around. Rain fell sideways in sheets, and wind threatened to tear the wings apart. And yet, the P-61 moved through it. Every panel, every wire, every bolt held. Every instrument recorded data. Every life aboard clung to the aircraft like it had become part of it. The radar operator shouted readings. The pilot banked carefully, avoiding the worst gusts while keeping the plane level enough for sensors to collect meaningful measurements. Sweat ran into his eyes, but he didn't blink. The storm might have been the most violent thing any of them had ever faced, but the P-61, built for the chaos of war, was holding together. It was a fighter meant for enemies on the ground and in the air, but here it was fighting the sky itself. After what seemed like endless hours, the storm began to weaken, giving way to calmer layers. The P-61 emerged battered but intact, instruments full of information that would revolutionize aviation. Every system had survived, every sensor had recorded. The aircraft had defied the storm itself. The crew exhaled, exhaustion finally overwhelming adrenaline. The sun was rising. They had made it. They had flown into a near-impossible tempest, and come back with knowledge no human had ever possessed. The P-61 had done what it was built to do, long after the war had ended. It had survived, adapted, and conquered a new kind of battle. And as the aircraft touched back down on the runway, the significance was clear. This machine, once feared for its silent hunts in the dead of night over Europe and the Pacific, had now faced nature itself, and survived. It had proven something extraordinary, that a fighter of war could become a pioneer of peace, that a machine built for death could deliver life in knowledge, and that even in the darkest, most violent nights, courage, human and mechanical, could still shine. Years later, historians will look back at the P-61 Black Widow and see a story few ever truly appreciated. They would study its design, its capabilities, its role in the dead of night hunting enemy planes over Europe and the Pacific. They would see statistics, kills, missions flown, sorties survived. But the true measure of its impact went far beyond numbers. It wasn't just a night fighter. It was a survivor. It carried men through darkness when few others could. It faced the unknown in skies where human eyes and conventional instruments failed. From the orchards of France, where one man's arrows could end multiple threats, to the vast Pacific where night raiders tested every skill and nerve of its crews, the Black Widow had consistently turned danger into protection. And then came the storms. Missions that no one had dared to fly. Missions that pushed the very limits of technology and human courage. Into lightning, hail, hurricane force gusts, and the heart of violent atmospheric chaos, the P-61 flew where others would have refused. Each flight contributed to the birth of modern meteorology, transforming civilian and military aviation forever. Veterans who had flown her often said the same thing. She felt alive. Not a machine, not just metal and wires, but a companion in the dark, a guardian in the night. Pilots spoke quietly of the hum of the engines that felt like heartbeat. The radar operator's console, like a nerve center connecting man and machine to the vast invisible sky. Museums now display the Black Widow, polished and static. To visitors, it's a relic of war. But those who know its story understand the quiet heroism hidden in its panels, wings, and nose. Every dent, every burn mark, every repaired panel carries a story of human endurance, calculated risk, and survival against odds both natural and man-made. Somewhere in the Pacific, someone who flew the final mission still recalls the thunderstorm flights, the terror, the awe, and the exhilaration of knowing they had piloted a war machine into a place no human had ever survived before. That memory, carried for decades, is a testament not only to the aircraft but to the ingenuity, bravery, and determination of the crews who trusted it with their lives. And perhaps that's the most remarkable thing about the P-61 Black Widow. It was never the fastest, never the most glamorous, never the first name that came to mind when people thought of World War II aircraft. But it endured, it protected, it transformed, it faced enemies of war and nature alike, and emerged victorious every time. In the end, the Black Widow's legacy is not written in headlines, but in survival, innovation, and courage.